mate, that is Lush and Chicks. Hey guys, it's Will from EDM Tips. Today I'm going to show you how to make music in the style of Anjunadeep Breakbeat. This is following on in my insanely popular series of creating different tracks in the style of different artists, and if you want to check out the other ones you can click there or there. There's one for Breakbeat like Bicep, which I think you might like if you like this video, and like that video I'm only using the plugins from within Ableton Live 10, so you can download the project file completely free below this video. We will create a breakbeat from scratch. We will create some massive Anjunadeep style chords. And we're going to create the bass line, the melody. I'm going to show you how to process it and everything in between. If you like this video, smash like, subscribe to the channel for tutorials like this each and every week. And without further ado, let's hop into the door and get it done. Okay, so the first thing is to discuss the vibe of breakbeat. The main difference being between house music and breakbeat is that the kick doesn't happen on every beat of the bar like it does with house music. So let's program it in the kicks, because that's going to be the underlying foundation of this track. I'm going to choose 124 for the BPM, and I'm going to call this, what should we name this bad boy? Let us name it Breaking Bad. Although it's going to be breaking good, but you know, whatevs. So let's get a decent kick in and get this breakbeat foundation put in. So I'm going to go to the EDM Tips Creative Toolkit and just listen to a couple of the kicks. I'm actually going to layer up these two. I quite like the way they sound. 5 and... So let's program these in. The first beat's going to be on the downbeat. And then if you have your grid set to 16ths or 8ths, either one of those, it's kind of easy to then program it in without getting too confused. And we want a little 16th for the second bit, so it's dum 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 bum. Like this. So that's the 16th there, and let's just duplicate that. And we're going to copy it with the other one as well. Then I'm going to show you something really cool that you can do to make a bit more interest, keep things really fresh. So let's just listen to that. We only really want the tick from the second one. And now this is the cool trick I want to show you. We're going to reverse a kick as well. And I'll show you the effect that has. We're first going to have to choose a sampler, and then choose reverse, because the simpler doesn't allow you to reverse the sample. Then I am going to have a reverse kick at the end of every couple of bars. There we go, so you can hear that reverse kick sound. So that's what we're going to have, and I'll just move it so it ends kind of a bit closer to the new bar. So it just allows that to kind of lead into the next bar, which is a pretty cool effect if you ask me. So now let's get the beats in. That's pretty simple. You kind of just put a snare on every other kick, well, on every other beat, as you would with house music. So let's put one, get a snare in there. Then we're going to work out the chord progression and the bass line. Cool. Again, I'm using the EDM Tips Creative Toolkit for this, just because it's really good and you can get it from below. So let's just put one on every other beat, as you would with house. And that's pretty much our breakbeat foundation. We're going to make this sound more cool with some layers. So let's put another beat there. Just have this one a lot lower in the mix, and this is just going to add more interest to that snare. In fact, you could just have that on every other snare, which is a great way to add movement to a tune. Right, now let's get those chords in. I'm using this MIDI keyboard, but you can program this in the piano roll editor if you don't have a keyboard. So I'm going to be using the analog synth from Ableton. I wanted to do this just using the just using the stock plugins if possible, so you guys can follow along. And it loads up just a simple saw wave. So let's first get those notes in. I'm going to do this in A minor. Regular watchers of this channel know I like it because it's easy. You're just working with the white notes, so it's easy not to get lost. So first we can draw in the key of A minor natural, which is just all the white notes from A. Like so. And if you copy those and put them down an octave, duplicate them up an octave, grab them all, move them to the side of the clip and press fold, you've now got 3 octaves of A minor natural to work with. And you can basically hit any of these notes and it's going to sound good. And that's how you do it. So let's draw in a bass line. Okay, so there we go. This is our Anjunadeep break kind of bass line. Now we need to actually make that bass line sound good. And the way we're going to do that is create some width and create some movement with a filter envelope. So as I said, we've just got the basic saw wave. So the first thing we're going to do in the analog is change the routing. So this wave goes to this filter, goes to this amplitude. This one goes to this one, goes to this one, and then we can pan them slightly left and right to widen up the sound. So that's the first thing we're going to do, and we're going to detune the second oscillator slightly. And you can hear now it's wider. And in terms of the amplitude shape, we're just going to have it nice and sustained. And all the movement's going to come from this filter envelope. So let's take both filters down, like so, and open them up over time with the filter envelope. If this is all a bit confusing, you can join my free training below where we go a bit more in depth into this kind of stuff. But for the time being, it's going to create this movement, like so. And then it closes down afterwards with the decay. But this is a bit too high up for a bass line, so let's drop it a couple of octaves. Open up the filter a bit. That's a bit more bassy. Nice. Now what we want to do is build out some chords that are going to sound amazing over the top of this. And the way we're going to do that is just duplicate this, call it chords, let's colour it cyan, the natural colour of synths, and we are just going to build the chords out over and above this template we've already built. So I'm going to put this a couple of octaves up. And we are going to build out these chords. All you need to do is skip a note each time if you've got it folded. If you're using Ableton Live 11, you've got a scale button down here which you can use, but I know not everyone's got it yet, so I'm just doing it like this. And I'm just moving them around as well to make them a bit more interesting. So let's first get the bass chords in. Just miss a note. And let's add some more release to those chords so they kind of merge into each other a bit. So what we need to do is just increase the release on the amplitude for both oscillators, and make sure we do the same for that filter envelope. So now they merge into each other. It sounds lovely. Let's add some unison. Just to thicken it up, increase the voices. So this is our kind of Anjunadeep style pad, and it's just based off that simple saw wave like we made the bass line with. Okay, let's crack on. I don't even have a magic list today, I'm just kind of doing this on the fly. So we want to duck some those beats with the sidechain compressor. Sorry, duck the bass and the chords so they sound a bit more, yeah, so the kick can pop through a bit. So all we need to do is drag on a compressor, like so. Open up this little button here and press sidechain, and then choose your sidechain input from what I call my SC channel. So if we look in there, all it is a sampler or a simpler with a simple little click, and there's one programmed on every beat, and that's kind of for house. And I've set it to, if we look at this, sends only output, so you can't actually ever hear that tick. It's just used as the compressor trigger. But what happens now is that our compressor is going to duck on every fourth beat, like so, as you would with house music. And obviously we don't really want that, we want it to duck in time with the kick. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy one of our kick tracks, we're going to just paste it in to our, well, we'll have to delete those first actually. And now the kick drum is going to, well, the duck is going to happen at the same time as the kick drum, like so. And we can do that with the bass as well. Now what we're going to do is add some reverb to the chords using the auxiliary channel. So I've created an auxiliary channel with a long reverb with a long decay time, and then I've just bumped up the volume a bit and taken out the low end. So let's have a listen to this, and do let me know if you're enjoying this so far. Give me a hell yeah in the comments, or an amen brother if you're feeling holy, and do let me know what style you want me to cover on this channel. I am going to be experimenting with a few more formats, so I'm not going to be doing these every week, or I might do still, but I do love them, so let me know. Whoops, wrong channel. Okay, now let's add some character to those drums. We need a bit of a groove going. But the first thing I'm going to do is actually, I'm just going to copy these chords, duplicate them, something called piano. This is a bit of a new technique, and instead of having a compressor on every one of these channels, this is a bit of a new routing technique I'm going to show you. I'm just going to group them together, and I'm just going to apply, and I'll call this music, and I'm going to apply the sidechain compression to that entire group instead. And then anything that goes in this group is going to be ducked the same way. So piano, I'm going to color this blue, and I'm going to just choose a standard piano sound. So I'll use the grand piano from Ableton Live. I can delete the compressors from the separate channels now, which I have done. Cool. But this time I'm going to add the reverb on the channel itself because I just want it to sound really washed out and pushed back in the mix. It's just to add more texture. And I'm taking out the low end. I might even put it up an octave. And with the bass, I'm going to add a drum bus, and that's just going to thicken it up a bit. Nice. So now let's get those drums really kind of interesting. What we're going to do for that is add some reverb to separate drums, and that's what I'm going to do here. If we open up in our drum rack, this little button down here, send and return, we can actually right click and then create return chain. And if we hit this routing button, we can choose if we want to have one of our auxiliary channels or send channels or return channels. It all means the same thing. But now we can actually just feed a little bit onto each separate drum. So let's do that. So now you can hear there's a little bit of reverb on the snare. I'm going to take out the low end of the chord so it doesn't fight with the bass. Now let's get those drums really interesting with some extra little sound effects. Stereo width is really important in these kind of Anjunadeep tracks as well. So if we go to our creative toolkit again, get some snaps. Let's get some finger snaps. That one's a bit hard, so we'll use these two. And I'm going to pan one left, I'm going to pan one right, and I'm just going to program them in our drum loop just before the snares each time. So that is what we're going to do. Just copy and paste that. Just a very simple thing. I might even add some, I think I might add some reverb. I think I copied and pasted it in the wrong place, so let's just kind of make sure we do that correctly. There we go. Duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. It can be quiet. It's just an extra layer of sound to get the ears tingling. Now I'm going to add some. I will just use an 808 closed hat. That is a classic drum machine, the Roland 808. It's used in trap as well. So I'm just going to use a closed hat from that and an open hat from that as well. Very simple, doesn't have to be anything more complex than that. I'm just going to tweak this beginning of the sample so we don't have this small silence in front of it, like so. And let's just program in some hi-hats on every 16th. What I'm going to do with the open hat though is I'm going to choose release 0 on 1 millisecond and sustain full, and that means when the MIDI note finishes then the sound will stop, because we don't want the closed hats and the open hats playing at the same time. So let's just choose Well, let's just drag them in first. Whoops. There we go. On every 16th, so choose 16ths on the grid. And I'm just going to randomly draw in a pattern of open hats and closed hats. And for the last of these 4 bars, I'm going to switch the pattern up slightly just to keep things interesting, like so. Cool, now we want to add even more interest to these drums, so I'm going to go for one more layered snare, and I'm also going to go for a couple more interesting sounds. These two. So let's just drag that in. And again, I'm going to pan these left and right and just create some interest in the stereo feel. Then I've got some really cool things to show you that I've never shown you before actually. And if you do like this, do please subscribe to my channel. So you can hear now we've got stuff happening in the stereo field. I'm not going to repeat this one on everyone though, just to keep things interesting and developing throughout the whole drum loop. And we will be fattening all this up with some processing very shortly, but the next thing that I want to add, as I said, is one more snare layer just to keep things a bit more interesting. Let's try claps. Snares. I think this one. Again, this is going to happen only every other snare. And we're going to have it quite low in the mix. This is really kind of being pernickety, but it's important to keep interest going. I might increase the volume of that slightly. Cool, okay, now I want to add some interest to it and some texture that's going to give it a really nice organic feeling. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this atmosphere. Have a sip of water, very important. Always stay hydrated when producing. And then I'm going to select a sound that I would have got from somewhere on my travels around the world. Okay, samples, effects, atmosphere. Chanting Buddhists in Christchurch. Let's use them. Let's just drag in this big sample. Okay, we've got some interference there. Okay, now this sidechain compression is ducking this as well, and that's good, we want that, but not yet. So I'm just going to bypass that for the time being. Cool, okay, so I like that little sound. I want it so that hood it is kind of happening in time with the tune. So let's just drag this over a bit. Obviously this is much too loud and it sounds really messy at the moment, but let me show you what I'm going to do. It's just going to add an extra level of depth to the music. So I'm going to put an EQ on there. In fact, firstly, I'll put an EQ, take out the low end, because look at all this, we don't need it. Then I'm going to compress it, so it just evens it out a bit. Although I might not need to, actually. No, I'm just going to leave it as it is. And then let's turn on this compressor again, the sidechain pump. In fact, I'll call it that so we can more easily see what it is. And now you can hear it's being ducked with the sidechain compression. And it doesn't matter that it's slightly out of time with the track, because that's just going to add an extra element of gritty realism. I'm just going to bring it in very low under everything else though. Now I am actually going to compress it just to make everything even. So that's what happens if you add reverb to it. Just adds another layer into the track. So this is off, and this is on. Now what we are going to do is actually take a little part of that. I like that bloke going hoodip or whatever he's saying. That. So I'm going to start use that as a sample in my drums as well. So let's turn off the sidechain compression so we can hear what's going on. Here we go. So this is just the bit we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate that. I'm going to drag it into my drums like this, into my drum rack. And now we've got this bloke as a sample as well. So what we're going to do is use the filter in the simpler to take out the low frequencies, so we're not going to muddy up our mix. Maybe a bit less. I quite like that. And we are going to use that as part of our drum rhythm as well, which is kind of a, yeah, it ties in the drums to the atmosphere as well. Like this. And just adds quite a nice little element into the track. So let's just copy that, paste it. Doesn't have to be high in the mix, keep it quiet. Cool. Okay, I'm really liking this now. I'm going to add a little bit of a synth melody, and again I'm just going to use the analog again, but I'm not going to put it in with the rest of the music because I don't want it to be ducked like this. Okay, let's just listen to it with the sidechain pump on. Let's turn down some of those extra kind of drums. It's really low. Ear candy. And then at the end of the beats we can add a little scarce snare skip like there. On the 16th, like so. That sounds pretty dope. Okay, let's get this melody on the go. I'm gonna just throw on an analog, and I'm gonna use my synth keyboard here, kindly donated by Arturia, the Keylab 61. Okay, now I'm going to, again, you can just use the keys within the scale of A minor natural and it's going to sound good, but I want this to be a really ethereal melody, so I don't want it to be ducked by the sidechain compressor. It's going to sit on top of everything. And what I'm going to do for that is choose a square wave, and I'll leave the saw wave. Detune it slightly, add some longer release. Too long. Add some unison. And I'm going to widen this up, and the way I'm going to do that is I'll use the Haas effect, and that means I can basically make one signal play slightly before the other, and it's going to create a stereo effect. So here, if we choose ping pong on a delay unit, you can hear it's bouncing back and forth, but what we can do is make the delay time really close, like so. Make them slightly different from each other, and turn the feedback right down, and it's going to create a really cool effect. So this is off, completely mono, and this is on. But check it in mono to make sure it still sounds good, which it does. Cool. So let's just make sure that we don't have any low end in there that we don't want. Add some reverb. That sounds really cool. Very, very simple, but a really nice sound. And now let's work out a melody over the top of our tune. I'm going to keep this really simple. That sounds good. Yeah, just really simple, adds to that emotion. So I'm just going to program that in. What you'll see, it's only the white notes. And if you use the template technique I showed you earlier in this video, you can't hit a wrong note, to be honest. So let us just repeat that. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. I think this is pretty much what I played. And then I'll switch it up the second time to make it a bit more interesting. So that's the main basics of this track. Now it's a case of doing a bit of mixing, adding some processing. So let's jump onto that. Don't forget you can download this project file completely free below. See, that's typical, isn't it? I kind of get excited towards the end. Most people have stopped watching by now, but hey ho. Let me know if you are still watching. Write aubergine in the comment, and then I know that you're still watching. That's okay. I know what that's going to look like when you use emojis, but hey ho, you know, get with the program. I want to make these drums more interesting. Okay, is that possible? I hear you ask. Yes, It is possible. I'm going to show you how. I'm just going to call this loop, and I'm going to dig into some drum loops. And the beauty of drum loops is that it adds a different texture as well, because it's obviously got its own kind of sample quality to it. It's got its own reverb, stuff like that, so it just adds another level of interest to the track. Sometimes I might not use the whole loop, but I might just take parts from it. But let's just bring some in and see if it adds anything to the track. So I like it, but I'm just going to use bits of it. I'm just going to use it every few beats like this. So let's just get rid of that. Just chopping it up a bit to do what we want with it. And I might find another one as well. That's cool. Let's just take a part of that though. I actually prefer that. Let's just use that one. So that's just like a house beat, but underneath the breakbeat. Cool, let's add some processing then. For the drums, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some, I'm just going to throw a drum bus on and do a little bit of processing with that. Great plugin this for fattening up drums. Okay, it's getting a bit loud now, so let's turn it all down and do the mix. First thing is the kicks. So let's bring in the bass now. I only want that first part, the top part of that kick, so I'm going to take out the low end. This is kick layering now. Drums. I know the chords. Piano. With the piano, actually, I think it should be lower down. That's getting a bit muddy. Maybe it doesn't add anything, so we'll just have to take it out. And now let's bring in the drums. Let's add a little bit of add a little bit of reverb to that flow. And bring in the loop. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit more mixing on this for you, and let's just see if we can kind of put this out into a tiny bit of a arrangement really quickly. Just kind of duplicate that. We'll go from a kind of break into a drop. Or, yeah, okay, so firstly let's take out the melody, because we only want that to come in the break. And we're going to kick things off with just the bass and the beats. So it sounds nice just with the bass and beats. And you could even have a break where you take the kicks out, but you need to then take the sidechain compression out as well, so everything's not pumping when the kick's not playing. Otherwise it sounds a bit weird. Like, check this out. Whereas this sounds a bit better, probably. Or you can have perhaps just a slight pump, like this, by automating the dry and wet. So you can still get an element of that pumping. But let's go to the main break anyway. So none of this, and see how it sounds. Let's add the bass notes in the chords, but lower down, because we still want some bass in the break. Okay, almost finished, guys. Thank you for sticking with me today. So I'm just going to copy that, take it down an octave. That's better. And then back to the bass. There you have it, guys. That is how to make Anjunadeep style breakbeat. I really hope you've enjoyed it. Don't forget to tune in next week, where I'll be sharing more music production tips. And if you like this, please share it with your friends, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget you can download this project file completely free below this video. Have a fantastic week, and until next time, cheers and happy producing.